Thought I would start tonight's show out with an interesting story I found. It's on a website called the Energy Mix, and it starts out reluctant U.S. car dealers and HVAC installers could slow electrification. There's this push right now. There's this push in our country, and not just our country, but in a lot of countries for electrification. And some consumers are pushing back. Some of you may be pushing back. You don't want to drive an electric car. Maybe you like your gas car or truck. You also might like your oil or gas heat, and you don't want to make this switch to electrification. And so I thought this story was interesting because it pointed out not just that consumers are part of this, but the HVAC installers themselves are a part of this, right? So if you can't find a heating and air company or installer to install the product that you want, then that really lessens your options as a consumer. I help folks on our website, newhvacguide.com, and where we help people through the process of, buying a heating and air system, helping them try to avoid some of the problems that homeowners face when they're going through that process, and trying to help them through that and educating them and so on. One of the things that we'll run into sometimes is I'll have customers on that website say, I can't find anybody in my area that will sell a particular brand or a particular product. So if they've got, let's say, 20 companies in their area, and none of those companies want to do what they want, none of those companies want to install a heat pump, for example, then that customer can't have a heat pump, unless they want to have it installed by somebody that doesn't know what they're doing or try to install it themselves. There's some DIY options out there. And then, of course, that brings on a whole set of problems, right? So getting back to our story here, it reads, even as U.S. consumers increasingly embrace electric vehicles and heat pumps, supply chain bottlenecks may arise from established networks of fossil car dealers and HVAC installers who are still heavily invested in legacy technologies. We've ran into that here on our YouTube channel. We've had guys say, hey, I don't want to sell high SEER heat pump systems, inverter systems. I'm going to sell what I want to sell. I don't care what the consumer wants or what the industry's going towards. I think I know my customers better than the manufacturers or the government. I know my customers better than them. I've done the math, and the math just doesn't work. That's what some of them will say. They are, as this article just said, heavily invested in those legacy technologies. The concern emerging in the US may actually point to a difference between the US and Canadian markets. Over the weekend, Clean Energy Canada reported that EV demand is still surging and supplies are still insufficient in Canada. So, wow. So that points out another point. When we in the US are looking at how other countries are moving towards, say, electric vehicles, and they're having issues making that switch, that's might be something that plays a role in this as well. I don't really care about the car side of this article. I thought it was more interesting, the HVAC side of this. Here we go. Heat pump uptake also risks being slowed by an, quote, incumbent network, unquote, pushing back against new technology. American households bought more heat pumps than gas furnaces for the first time ever last year, but heating, ventilation, and air conditioning contractors' reluctance to learn the installation guidelines could slow things down. So what are your thoughts on this, guys? As we go through this article, what are your thoughts? Have you run into this? Have you seen some contractors saying, hey, I don't care where the industry's heading. I don't care that you want this newer technology. I'm not going to sell it. Have you run into that? I'm very curious. Quote, contractors may not be familiar with the latest options. They may have existing sales channel relationships limiting their access to the latest and greatest, and they fear bad reviews, unquote, writes Bloomberg. Recognizing the urgent need for installer education, the U.S. Department of Energy is now heavily involved in the training established and upcoming HVAC professionals on heat pump technology, assisting in almost 80% of all HVAC training programs in the country. Wow, I didn't even know. So that's interesting right there, that the DOE is assisting in almost 80% of all HVAC training programs. Ensuring all systems go on EV and heat pump adoption will be critical to reaching net zero by 2050 targets, Bloomberg noted. Of the U.S., $194 trillion in investment will be needed to hit that target. 51% will be spent on these two technologies. So yeah, just thought that was an interesting article. As we've talked about in the past, the fact that there are some heating and air guys, whether it's they don't want to make the switch, maybe it's they feel like they know better. Maybe they have done the math and they think that there's no upside to paying the extra money for some of these systems. And I think that that may have been a valid argument in the past, but as time has gone on, we're starting to see more budget-friendly inverter systems coming out there. We've done videos on the Daikin Fit and with some of the rebates that they have in place and some of the other programs, and I'm sure there's other systems out there too. We just, as you guys know, that's what I sell. And a lot of you know anyway, you may not know that. They are at times less expensive than installing a single stage system. You can actually spend less money in the end and have a more efficient system in the end. Extremely quieter, extremely lots of things.